My grandfather left me his entire estate, and I watched all my toxic family members suddenly remember my number. For 15 years, I'd been the invisible grandchild, the one who didn't go to the right college, didn't marry into the right family, didn't have the right career. I worked as a kindergarten teacher while my cousins became lawyers and investment bankers. At family gatherings, they'd look right through me while discussing their portfolios and vacation homes. Grandpa was different. He'd call every Sunday to ask about my students, my little apartment, my garden. He never cared that I drove a 2007 Honda or that I bought my clothes at thrift stores. When everyone else scattered after Grandma died, I was the one who visited him twice a week, bringing him homemade soup and sitting through his old war stories. My mom stopped inviting me to holidays after I refused to ask Grandpa for money to bail out my brother's failing restaurant. "You're selfish," she'd said. Family helps family. Funny how that only applied when they needed something. When Grandpa died last month, I expected nothing. Maybe his watch or his collection of old vinyl records. Instead, the lawyer called me into his office alone. Grandpa had rewritten his will 6 months before he passed. The estate was worth $4.2 million. The house, the investments, the beach property he'd inherited from his parents. All of it came to me. My phone started ringing within hours of the reading. My mom called first, crying about how much she missed me, how she'd been so wrong to push me away. Dad texted suggesting we have dinner to catch up, something we hadn't done since 2019. My brother, who'd blocked my number after I wouldn't ask Grandpa for that loan, suddenly had photos of us as kids he wanted to share. Remember how close we used to be? My cousin Whitney, who once told me at Thanksgiving that I was wasting my education, invited me to her daughter's birthday party. My aunt started commenting on every social media post I'd made in the past 3 years, even the ones about my cat. They were so transparent it was almost funny. Almost. What wasn't funny was finding out my uncle had already contacted 3 different lawyers trying to contest the will, or that my mom had been telling everyone Grandpa wasn't in his right mind when he made those changes. She'd even dug up medical records trying to prove dementia. The estate lawyer called yesterday with news. My family had banded together, pooling resources for a legal challenge. They'd found some distant cousin, a geriatric psychiatrist, willing to provide an expert opinion that Grandpa had been unduly influenced by me. They were claiming I'd manipulated a dying man, isolated him from his real family, and coerced him into changing his will. They had signed statements from family members I hadn't seen in years, all swearing they'd witnessed my controlling behavior. I sat in my classroom after school, looking at the lawyer's email, and realized something. The inheritance didn't just give me money, it gave me evidence. 15 years of ignored calls, declined invitations, and documented dismissals. Every email I'd sent trying to coordinate family visits for Grandpa that went unanswered. Every birthday card I'd mailed him that he'd saved with little notes about how no one else remembered. Grandpa had kept everything, including a video he'd recorded 3 weeks before he died, explaining exactly why he'd made his choice. I couldn't fit what happens next in this short video. Watch the rest down below. The video was 47 minutes long. Grandpa had recorded it on his iPad, sitting in his favorite leather chair with the afternoon light streaming through the window behind him. His voice was clear and strong, nothing like the frail testimony my family was trying to paint. The estate lawyer, Theodore Brennan, had scheduled an emergency viewing for the following Monday. Just me, him, and the stenographer who'd transcribe every word for the court record. I called in sick to work. It wasn't a lie. My stomach had been in knots since the legal papers arrived. 23 family members had signed onto the lawsuit, people I hadn't seen since childhood. Second cousins I couldn't pick out of a lineup. All of them suddenly very concerned about Grandpa's mental state in his final months. Theodore's office was downtown in one of those old buildings with marble floors and wood paneling that screamed expensive. He was maybe 60, gray at the temples, with kind eyes that had probably seen every family drama imaginable. "Before we start," he said, gesturing to the leather chairs across from his desk, "I want you to understand what we're dealing with. Your family has filed a formal petition to invalidate the will, based on undue influence and lack of testamentary capacity. They've submitted 17 affidavits, and hired Dr. Vernon Castellano to provide expert testimony. The distant cousin who's a psychiatrist. He's more than distant. He's your mother's second cousin, twice removed. They met exactly once, at a funeral in 1987. Theodore opened a folder. Dr. Castellano has provided a sworn statement claiming that based on medical records and family testimony, your grandfather showed signs of cognitive decline consistent with early-stage dementia. My hands clenched. Grandpa was sharp as a tack. He did the crossword every morning. He managed his own investments. He could quote entire poems from memory. I believe you. The video will help prove that. Theodore pulled out his laptop. But I need to warn you, this is going to be difficult to watch. Your grandfather was very explicit about his reasons. He names names. He gives specific examples. It's not going to be comfortable. I straightened my shoulders. I can handle it. Theodore pressed play. Grandpa's face filled the screen. He looked tired, but determined. Behind him, I could see the bookshelf with all his war memorabilia and the framed photo of Grandma from their wedding day. My name is Robert Henry Whitmore, Grandpa began. I am 79 years old. Today is March 14th, 2024. I am of sound mind and body, and I'm recording this video to explain my final wishes regarding my estate, because I know damn well what's going to happen when I'm gone. Even on the recording, his voice carried that authority he'd had when he was still a colonel, the kind of voice that made you sit up straight. I'm leaving everything to my granddaughter. Everything. And I want to explain exactly why, so there's no confusion, no misunderstanding, and no room for my family to twist the truth after I'm dead. Grandpa adjusted his glasses. Let me start with my daughter, my only child. I raised her alone after my wife died, worked 2 jobs to send her to college, paid for her wedding, helped with the down payment on her first house. And for the past 15 years, she's called me maybe twice a year, Christmas and my birthday, if I was lucky. When her son needed money for his failing restaurant, she sent my granddaughter to manipulate me into writing a check. When I said no, she stopped calling altogether for 8 months. My throat tightened. I remembered that fight, the screaming match at Thanksgiving when Mom had accused me of turning Grandpa against the family. Then there's my son-in-law, Grandpa continued. Nice enough fellow when he wants something. He borrowed $40,000 from me in 2015 to invest in some cryptocurrency scheme, never paid back a cent. When I asked about it last Christmas, he told me to stop living in the past. That was the last time I saw him. The video went on. Grandpa detailed every slight, every missed visit, every broken promise. He talked about my brother who'd only shown up when he needed money, about my uncle who'd tried to convince him to sell the beach house and split the proceeds, about Whitney who'd told him at Grandpa's 75th birthday party that she was too busy to visit, but had time to go to Aruba 3 times that year. And then there's my granddaughter, Grandpa said, and his entire face softened. She came every Tuesday and Friday like clockwork. She brought me soup when I had the flu. She sat with me at the oncologist when I had that cancer scare, took notes, asked questions the doctors needed to hear. She never asked for money, never even hinted at the inheritance. She just showed up. On the screen, Grandpa pulled out a stack of papers. These are birthday cards, 15 years worth, 1 every year. She never forgot, not once. And look at what she writes. He opened one, squinting at my handwriting. This one's from 2019. Dear Grandpa, I hope this year brings you joy and good health. Thank you for teaching me that success isn't about money. It's about showing up for the people you love. You've always shown up for me. She was making $34,000 a year teaching kindergarten, and she was thanking me. I had to look away from the screen. Theodore quietly pushed a box of tissues across the desk. My family will say I was manipulated, Grandpa continued. They'll say she isolated me from them, but the truth is, they isolated themselves. They chose their vacations and their careers and their social calendars over spending time with an old man. She chose differently. She chose to show up. And that's why she gets everything. Grandpa leaned forward, staring directly into the camera. If anyone contests this will, know this. I kept records. Every unanswered phone call, every canceled visit, every time someone asked for money but couldn't be bothered to ask how I was doing. My granddaughter has access to all of it. And if you try to take what I've given her, she has my permission to burn your reputations to the ground. The video ended. The office was silent except for the quiet hum of the air conditioning. That's powerful testimony, Theodore finally said. Your grandfather clearly had capacity. He's articulate, specific, and his reasoning is sound. This will be very difficult for your family to overcome. What happens now? We file this with the court as evidence. We also submit all the documentation your grandfather kept. Phone records, emails, the birthday cards, everything that corroborates his version of events. Theodore closed his laptop. I'll be honest with you. Cases like this usually settle out of court. Once your family sees what we have, they'll likely withdraw their petition. And if they don't, then we go to trial. We put your grandfather's video in front of a judge. We call witnesses. We document every instance of neglect and opportunism. Theodore's expression was grim. It won't be pretty. These things never are. But based on what I've seen, you'll win. I left Theodore's office with a USB drive containing the video and a thick folder of documentation. The afternoon sun was too bright. Everything felt surreal. I sat in my car for 20 minutes just breathing before I could drive home. My phone rang as I pulled into my apartment complex. Mom. I let it go to voicemail. She called back immediately, and again, and again. On the 5th call, I answered. We need to talk, she said. No hello, no pretense of warmth, just straight to business now that the mask had dropped. I'm listening. This legal challenge isn't personal. We just want what's fair. Dad wasn't himself at the end, you know that. The medication affected his judgment. He wasn't on any medication that affects cognition. I have his complete medical file. Silence. Then, you've always been difficult. Ever since you were little. Dad spoiled you, made you think you were special, but you're not. You're a kindergarten teacher living in a 1-bedroom apartment. You have no idea how to manage an estate this size. Let us help you. We'll split everything fairly, and everyone can move on. Fairly? You mean I give you millions of dollars and we all pretend the last 15 years didn't happen? Don't be dramatic. We're family. You blocked my number, Mom. For 2 years. I found out Dad had his gallbladder out from a Facebook post. That's not family. I was hurt. You refused to help your brother when he needed you. When we needed you. Grandpa said no. I was just the messenger, and you punished me for it. Oh, here we go. Poor little victim. You always did this, made everything about you. Her voice was rising now, that sharp edge she got when she wasn't getting her way. We're not dropping this lawsuit. We have proof Dad was influenced. We have witnesses. You think you're so smart with your little documents, but we've been preparing too. Dr. Castellanos' report is damning. By the time we're done, everyone will know exactly what kind of person you are. The kind who showed up, I said quietly. That's what kind of person I am. I'm the kind of person who showed up. I hung up. My hands were shaking. I'd never talked to my mother like that. Growing up, she'd had this way of making me feel small, like my opinions and feelings were inconveniences she had to tolerate. Standing up to her felt both terrifying and exhilarating. The next morning, I met with Theodore again. He'd received the official response to our evidence submission. My family's lawyers had doubled down. They weren't withdrawing anything. They'd added 2 more psychiatrists to their witness list and filed a motion to exclude Grandpa's video on the grounds that it was made under my influence. They're claiming you were there when it was recorded, Theodore explained, that you coached him on what to say. I didn't even know the video existed until after he died. I know, but they're arguing that your presence in his life during that period constitutes undue influence regardless of whether you were physically there during the recording. Theodore spread several documents across his desk. They've also subpoenaed your phone records, your bank statements, and your employment history. They're looking for any evidence that you were financially motivated. I never took a cent from him. I know, but they're going to try to prove otherwise. They'll look for any deposits that don't match your salary, any unexplained purchases. They'll paint you as a grifter who spent years grooming an elderly man. I felt sick. How do we fight this? We build your case. We show the court who you really are. Theodore handed me a legal pad and pen. I need you to make a list. Every visit with your grandfather, every phone call, every email. If you remember the date, great. If not, approximate. We're going to document everything. I spent the next 3 days writing. I filled 6 legal pads with memories. The time I drove through a snowstorm to bring Grandpa dinner because his power had gone out. The afternoon we spent organizing Grandma's photos into albums. The Sunday mornings I'd call him before church to see if he needed anything from the store. Every soup delivery. Every doctor's appointment. Every time I'd sat with him watching old war movies he'd seen 100 times. Theodore also had me contact character witnesses. Other teachers at my school. Parents of my students. My landlord. The woman at the coffee shop where Grandpa and I had breakfast every other Saturday. Anyone who could testify to my character and my relationship with Grandpa. The deposition started 2 weeks later. My family's lawyers had rented conference rooms in a downtown law firm, all glass and steel and intimidation. They deposed me for 6 hours. 2 attorneys, a stenographer, and a video camera recording every word. They asked about every visit to Grandpa's house, every conversation, every email. They wanted to know why I'd never mentioned the inheritance, why Grandpa had changed his will, whether I'd suggested it, whether I'd known about it. They asked about my finances, my debts, my student loans. They asked if I resented my family's success, if I'd been jealous of my cousins, if I'd manipulated an old man out of revenge. I answered every question honestly. Yes, I'd visited frequently. No, I'd never discussed the inheritance. No, I hadn't known about the will change. Yes, I had student loans. No, I'd never asked Grandpa for money. Yes, my family had excluded me. No, I hadn't done this for revenge. I'd done it because I loved him. By hour 5, I was exhausted. The lawyers were asking the same questions in different ways, trying to trip me up, trying to find inconsistencies. But there weren't any. The truth was simple. I'd shown up. They hadn't. Theodore called that night. You did great. You were consistent, believable, and you didn't let them rattle you. But I need to warn you about tomorrow. They're deposing your mother. What does that mean for us? It means she's going to testify about why she believes your grandfather lacked capacity. She's going to talk about signs of dementia she allegedly witnessed. She's going to paint herself as a concerned daughter who was kept away from her father by a manipulative grandchild. Theodore paused. It's going to be ugly. Are you sure you want to be there? You have the right to attend, but you don't have to. I'm going to be there. Mom's deposition was in the same conference room. She arrived in designer clothes, her hair freshly done, looking every inch the grieving daughter. She even had a tissue ready, though I never saw her use it. My brother and uncle sat in chairs along the wall. Moral support, I supposed. They glared at me when I walked in. Theodore started with basic questions. Mom's relationship with Grandpa, how often she visited, when she last saw him. Her answers were careful, measured. She'd visited regularly, she claimed, every few weeks. She'd noticed changes in his behavior, confusion, memory lapses, mood swings. She'd been concerned, but Grandpa had refused to see a doctor. I'd been defensive when she'd tried to discuss it, she said. Accused her of looking for problems. It was masterful fiction. Theodore let her talk, taking notes, his expression neutral. Then he opened his folder. Mrs. Richardson, you stated you visited your father every few weeks. Is that correct? Yes. And when was the last time you visited him before he died? I believe it was mid-February. February of this year? Yes. Your father died on March 28th, so you saw him approximately 6 weeks before his death? Yes, roughly. Theodore pulled out a document. This is the visitor log from your father's assisted living facility. Are you aware that all guests were required to sign in? Mom's face paled slightly. Yes. According to this log, your last visit was November 12th of last year, 5 months before his death. Would you like to revise your testimony? The room went dead silent. I watched Mom's composure crack. That can't be right. I visited him. I know I did. Maybe I didn't sign in. Maybe I forgot. The facility requires all visitors to sign in for security purposes. There are no exceptions. Theodore pulled out another document. These are your father's phone records. In the 6 months before his death, you called him 3 times. Each call lasted less than 5 minutes. Does that align with your definition of regular contact? I was busy. I had responsibilities. Work, family. Yet you found time for a 2-week vacation to Cabo San Lucas in February. Your Instagram posts are quite detailed. I watched my brother shift uncomfortably in his chair. Uncle was staring at the table. I needed a break, Mom snapped. Taking care of an elderly parent is stressful. You just testified you hadn't seen him in 5 months. How were you taking care of him? I was worried about him. That's stressful too. Theodore let that hang in the air. Mrs. Richardson, you've also testified that you witnessed signs of dementia. Can you describe those signs specifically? He would forget things, repeat himself, get confused about dates. When did you witness this? During my visits. Your last visit was November 12th, over 4 months before he changed his will. Are you testifying that he showed signs of dementia that early? Yes, it was progressing. Then why didn't you report this to his doctors? Why didn't you seek a medical evaluation? Theodore pulled out more documents. I recognize them as Grandpa's medical records. According to his healthcare providers, he had a cognitive assessment 3 weeks before he changed his will. He scored perfectly. No signs of impairment. If you were so concerned about his mental state, why didn't you pursue medical intervention? Mom's jaw clenched. You're twisting my words. I'm simply asking for clarity. You claim he was impaired, yet you never sought medical help. You claim you visited regularly, yet the records show you didn't. You claim you were a devoted daughter, yet your own father's will suggests otherwise. Theodore leaned forward. Mrs. Richardson, isn't it true that you only became concerned about your father's mental state after you learned you'd been excluded from his will? Isn't it true that you hadn't seen your father in 5 months when he died? That you missed his birthday, skipped Christmas, and didn't even call him on Father's Day? I loved my father. Then why didn't you show up? The question echoed in the silent room. Mom opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again. This is harassment. I don't have to sit here and be attacked. You filed a lawsuit claiming your father lacked capacity to make decisions about his own estate. These questions are relevant. Theodore's voice was calm, almost gentle. Let me ask you something else. When did you learn your father had changed his will? The day of the reading. And how soon after that did you contact an attorney? A few days. Theodore slid another document across the table. This is a retainer agreement with Blackstone and Associates dated the same day as the will reading. You signed it 6 hours after leaving the lawyer's office. You also texted your brother that same afternoon. Would you like me to read the text? Mom's eyes flashed with anger, but she said nothing. Theodore read from his phone. Quote, that little bitch got everything. We need to fight this. Get everyone on board. I have a lawyer. Does that sound like a grieving daughter concerned about her father's mental state? Or does it sound like someone angry about money? You have no right. These texts were submitted as part of discovery. You provided them. And this text was sent before you'd seen any medical records, before you'd consulted with experts, before you had any basis for claiming impairment. You decided to contest the will based purely on the fact that you didn't get what you wanted. Theodore closed his folder. I think we're done here. Mom stood up so fast her chair scraped against the floor. This isn't over. We have proof. Real doctors, real testimony. You think you're so clever, but everyone will see through her act. Everyone will know what she is. She stormed out. My brother and uncle followed without looking at me. Theodore waited until the door closed. That went better than expected. Better? She looked ready to murder someone. Exactly. She lost control. She showed her true motivation. The transcript of this deposition will be very helpful in court. Theodore gathered his documents. Your family's case is falling apart. Their timeline doesn't match the records. Their witnesses aren't credible. And your mother just admitted she hired a lawyer before she had any medical evidence. So what happens now? Now we depose your brother, your uncle, and your cousins. We document every inconsistency, and we wait for them to realize they can't win. The next 3 weeks were brutal. I went back to work, trying to maintain some normalcy, but everything felt off. Parents of my students would ask how I was doing with that sympathetic head tilt people use when they know something's wrong but don't want to pry. I'd smile and say I was fine. In reality, I wasn't sleeping. I'd wake up at 3 a.m. with my mind racing through worst-case scenarios. What if the judge didn't believe me? What if Mom's psychiatrist was convincing? What if they proved I'd somehow influenced Grandpa without even knowing it? Theodore kept me updated after each deposition. My brother admitted he'd only visited Grandpa twice in the last year. Whitney acknowledged she'd invited Grandpa to her daughter's birthday party, but had been relieved when he couldn't come. My uncle confessed he'd suggested selling the beach house multiple times, always with the angle that the money could be better invested. None of them could provide specific examples of Grandpa's supposed cognitive decline. Their testimony was vague, based on feeling rather than fact. He seemed confused. He wasn't himself. Something was off. Nothing concrete. Nothing medical. Nothing that could stand up against the actual evidence. Then came the expert witnesses. Dr. Castellano went first. He'd reviewed Grandpa's medical records and conducted interviews with family members. Based on this secondhand information, he'd concluded that Grandpa showed signs of mild cognitive impairment, consistent with early-stage dementia. Theodore's cross-examination was surgical. Dr. Castellano, did you ever personally examine Robert Whitmore? No, but did you ever speak with him? No, I'm basing my opinion on medical records and family interviews. How many family members did you interview? 7. And how many of those family members are plaintiffs in this lawsuit? All of them. So your expert opinion is based entirely on information provided by people who have a financial interest in proving your conclusion. Is that correct? Castellano shifted in his seat. I'm a professional. I don't let bias influence my medical opinions. But you've never examined the patient. You've never observed his behavior firsthand. You're making a diagnosis of dementia based solely on testimony from people who admitted during their own depositions that they rarely saw him. Theodore pulled out documents. Mr. Whitmore's actual treating physicians diagnosed no cognitive impairment. He passed a cognitive assessment 3 weeks before changing his will. How do you explain that? Those tests aren't always conclusive. Early-stage dementia can be inconsistent. Conveniently inconsistent enough that it only appeared when he decided to exclude certain family members from his will? The deposition went downhill from there. By the end, Castellano's testimony was so riddled with qualifiers and admissions of uncertainty that it was basically useless. Theodore told me later that expert witnesses lose credibility fast when they can't cite first-hand observations. Our expert was Dr. Patricia Montoya, a geriatric psychiatrist with 30 years of experience. She'd reviewed all of Grandpa's medical records, his cognitive assessments, and the video testimony. Her conclusion was unequivocal. Robert Whitmore had possessed full testamentary capacity when he'd changed his will. He'd understood the nature of his assets, the natural objects of his bounty, legal speak for family members, and the disposition he was making. He'd articulated clear, rational reasons for his choices. There was no evidence of delusion, impairment, or undue influence. 3 months after the lawsuit began, Theodore called with news. They're willing to settle. My heart jumped. What does that mean? It means they know they're going to lose. They're offering to drop the lawsuit in exchange for you paying their legal fees. How much? $200,000. I sat down hard on my couch. $200,000. They dragged me through hell for 3 months, lie under oath, try to destroy my reputation, and now they want me to pay them? It's a common tactic. They spent money on lawyers and they want to recoup some of it. They're framing it as a compromise. You keep the estate, they get their legal fees covered. What if I say no? Then we go to trial. Based on everything we have, I'm confident we'll win. But trials are unpredictable and expensive. Even if we win, you'll spend at least another $100,000 on legal fees. Maybe more. So either way, I'm out $200,000. More or less. I know it's not fair, but that's the reality of litigation. Theodore paused. However, there is another option. We can counteroffer. Make them an ultimatum. They drop the lawsuit with prejudice, meaning they can never refile, and you won't pursue sanctions or sue them for malicious prosecution. They get nothing, but they don't risk losing in court and having their reputations destroyed. Would they go for that? I think they might. Your mother's deposition was a disaster. Dr. Castellano's testimony was worthless. They don't have a case and they know it. The question is whether their egos will let them walk away with nothing. I thought about it for a long time. $200,000 was a lot of money, but it was also the principle. They'd spent years ignoring Grandpa. They'd weaponized the legal system to punish me for having a relationship they couldn't be bothered to maintain. And now they wanted me to reward that behavior with money. Counter with nothing, I said. Tell them to drop everything or we go to trial and I'll make sure every detail of their neglect becomes public record. You're sure? I'm sure. Grandpa said I had his permission to burn their reputations to the ground. I'm not giving them a cent. Theodore delivered the counteroffer that afternoon. 2 days later, I got the response. The plaintiffs were rejecting the counter and would see me in court. They're bluffing, Theodore assured me. This is posturing. They're hoping you'll crack and offer them something. Don't. He was right. A week before the trial date, I received a frantic call from Whitney, not through lawyers, just her personal cell phone at 11 p.m. on a Thursday. We need to talk, she said without preamble. I don't think that's appropriate. All communication should go through Theodore. Please, just hear me out. Your mom is losing it. She's convinced she can win, but the rest of us aren't so sure. We just want this to be over. Then drop the lawsuit. We can't. Not without getting something. We've spent too much money. If we walk away with nothing, we look like idiots. You are idiots. You're suing me because Grandpa loved me more than he loved you, because I showed up and you didn't. You want me to pay you for that? It's not about that. It's about fairness. $4 million is too much for one person. Dad would have wanted his estate divided. Grandpa wanted exactly what he said in his will. He made a video explaining his choices. He kept records of every time you ignored him. You don't have a leg to stand on. I took a breath. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to drop the lawsuit. You're going to do it publicly, with a statement acknowledging that Grandpa had capacity and made his choice freely, and then you're never going to contact me again. That's insane. Your mom will never agree to that. Then we'll see her in court. I'll put Grandpa's video in front of a judge. I'll show everyone the visitor logs, the phone records, the birthday cards. Everyone will know exactly who you all are. Is that what you want? Whitney was silent for a long moment. You've changed. You used to be so nice, so accommodating. I grew a spine. Turns out years of being invisible will do that. She hung up without another word. The trial was scheduled for a Monday in late September. Theodore had prepared me thoroughly. We had our evidence organized, our witnesses ready, our arguments rehearsed. The night before, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Grandpa, about how he'd kept every birthday card, about how he'd recorded that video knowing exactly what would happen after he died. He'd given me more than money. He'd given me proof that I wasn't crazy, that the years of being dismissed and ignored had been real, that my family's sudden affection was as hollow as I'd suspected. Monday morning arrived cold and gray. I wore the only suit I owned, a navy blue outfit I'd bought for interviews 5 years ago. Theodore met me on the courthouse steps, briefcase in hand, looking confident and calm. They still haven't withdrawn, he said. We're really doing this. Inside, the courtroom was smaller than I expected. Wood paneling, fluorescent lights, and the faint smell of old paper. My family was already there, clustered on one side like a funeral receiving line. Mom, Dad, my brother, Whitney, my uncle, my aunt, and several cousins I barely recognized, all of them in expensive suits, all of them refusing to look at me. Judge Barbara Hendricks entered promptly at 9. She was maybe 50, with silver hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. I've reviewed the briefs and the evidence submitted by both sides, she began without preamble. This appears to be a family dispute over an estate. The plaintiffs claim the decedent lacked capacity and was unduly influenced. The defendant claims the decedent's wishes were clear and well documented. Is that accurate? Both legal teams confirmed. Before we proceed with testimony, I want to make something clear. I've seen the video recorded by Mr. Whitmore. I've read his medical records. I've reviewed the depositions. Unless the plaintiffs can provide compelling evidence that contradicts these documents, I'm inclined to uphold the will as written. However, I'll hear your case. Plaintiff's counsel, you may proceed. The next 6 hours were exhausting. My family's lawyers called witnesses who testified about Grandpa's supposed decline. They brought in Dr. Castellano, who repeated his diagnosis. They submitted the affidavits claiming I'd isolated Grandpa from his family. They painted a picture of a lonely old man, vulnerable and confused, manipulated by a calculating grandchild who saw dollar signs. Theodore's cross-examinations were brutal. He destroyed every timeline, exposed every inconsistency, and forced witness after witness to admit they had no first-hand knowledge of Grandpa's mental state during the relevant period. When Dr. Castellano tried to maintain his diagnosis, Theodore made him watch the entire 47-minute video right there in court, made him point to specific moments where Grandpa showed signs of impairment. Castellano couldn't do it. Then it was our turn. Theodore started with the visitor logs, the phone records, the birthday cards. He established a clear pattern of neglect. Then he called character witnesses. My principal testified about my dedication to my students. My landlord talked about seeing me load groceries into my car every Friday night, the same groceries I'd bring to Grandpa the next morning. The woman from the coffee shop described our Saturday morning routine, how Grandpa's face would light up when I walked in. Finally, Theodore played the video. The whole courtroom watched as Grandpa explained his choices, named names, gave specific examples, showed absolute clarity of mind and purpose. By the time it ended, several people in the gallery were crying. Mom's face was stone. The judge was taking notes. The court will adjourn for the day, Judge Hendricks announced. I'll review all testimony and issue a ruling tomorrow at 2 p.m. That night was worse than the night before the trial. I kept replaying moments. Mom's face when the visitor logs were shown, Whitney squirming during her testimony, the judge's expression during Grandpa's video. Theodore told me not to worry, that we'd presented a strong case, but I couldn't shake the fear that somehow, despite everything, the judge would rule against me. Tuesday dragged. I tried to go to work but couldn't focus. I called in after lunch and drove to the courthouse early. Theodore was already there, reading through notes. How are you holding up? I'm terrified. Don't be. We won. We both know we won. He looked at his watch. But I won't relax until the judge says so. At exactly 2 p.m., Judge Hendricks returned. The courtroom rose. She settled into her chair, adjusted her glasses, and opened a folder. I've considered all the evidence presented in this case. The plaintiffs have argued that Robert Whitmore lacked testamentary capacity and was subject to undue influence by his granddaughter. The defendant has argued that Mr. Whitmore's wishes were clear, documented, and made with full capacity. After careful review, I find the plaintiff's case completely without merit. I felt my knees go weak. Theodore's hand steadied my elbow. Mr. Whitmore clearly possessed testamentary capacity when he changed his will. His video testimony demonstrates lucid thinking, clear memory, and rational decision-making. His medical records support this. The cognitive assessment performed 3 weeks before he changed his will shows no impairment whatsoever. The plaintiff's expert witness, Dr. Castellano, never examined Mr. Whitmore and based his opinion entirely on secondhand information from individuals with financial interests in this litigation. His testimony carries no weight. Judge Hendricks looked directly at my family. Furthermore, the evidence shows a pattern of neglect by the plaintiffs. Visitor logs, phone records, and documentary evidence all demonstrate that the plaintiffs had minimal contact with Mr. E. Whitmore in the years before his death, and even less in the final months of his life. In contrast, the defendant maintained consistent, documented contact. She attended medical appointments, provided care, and showed genuine devotion. The judge's voice hardened. The claim of undue influence is particularly egregious. There is zero evidence that the defendant requested, suggested, or even knew about the will change before Mr. Whitmore's death. The plaintiffs have manufactured a narrative to explain away a painful truth. Their father and grandfather chose to disinherit them because they failed to maintain a relationship with him. This is not evidence of incapacity or influence. This is consequence. Mom made a small sound. I couldn't tell if it was a gasp or a sob. The will stands as written. The estate passes entirely to the defendant. Additionally, I'm awarding attorney's fees to the defendant. The plaintiffs filed this lawsuit in bad faith with no credible evidence for the sole purpose of overturning a will they found unfair. They will bear the cost of this litigation. Judge Hendricks closed her folder. One more thing. Mr. Whitmore's video testimony included a statement that if anyone contested his will, his granddaughter had permission to expose their behavior publicly. She has refrained from doing so throughout this proceeding. She's shown remarkable restraint. But I want to note for the record that everything discussed in this courtroom is now part of the public record. Anyone interested in this family's dynamics can access these documents. The plaintiffs might want to consider that before they attempt any appeals. The gavel came down. Case dismissed. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Theodore was shaking my hand, congratulating me, already talking about filing for fees. I couldn't process any of it. I just stared at my family as they gathered their things. Mom's face was red. Dad looked defeated. My brother wouldn't meet my eyes. Whitney was crying. One by one, they filed out of the courtroom without a word. In the hallway outside, I finally broke down. All the tension, all the fear, all the anger came pouring out. Theodore let me cry, handed me tissues, and waited patiently until I could speak again. What happens now? I finally asked. Now, we file for attorney's fees. Based on the judge's ruling, we'll likely recover most of your legal expenses. The estate transfers to you officially. and your family has 30 days to file an appeal, though I doubt they will. That was a decisive ruling. And if they do appeal, we win again. The evidence is overwhelming, but honestly, I think they're done. This was expensive and humiliating. They're not going to prolong it. I drove home in a daze. My phone was buzzing constantly, but I ignored it. I needed silence. Needed to process what had just happened. I'd won. Grandpa's wishes were being honored. His estate was mine, and my family had been exposed for exactly what they were. That night, I sat in my apartment with a glass of wine I never drank, and finally listened to my voicemails. Most were from reporters who'd apparently been in the courtroom. A few were from distant relatives I didn't even know, congratulating me or offering to help manage the inheritance for a small fee. One was from Whitney. I wanted to say I'm sorry. Not for the lawsuit. I'm not ready to admit we were wrong, but I'm sorry it came to this. I'm sorry we couldn't just talk like family. I don't know if you'll ever forgive us, but I hope someday you can understand we thought we were doing the right thing. I deleted it. There was nothing to understand. They'd spent years proving I didn't matter. Then they'd spent months trying to punish me for being the only one who cared. Understanding didn't factor into it. The next few weeks were a blur of paperwork, transfer documents, tax forms, estate management. Theodore connected me with a financial advisor who helped me understand what I was inheriting. Not just money, but property, investments, Grandpa's entire legacy. It was overwhelming. I took a leave of absence from teaching to handle everything, moved out of my apartment and into Grandpa's house. It felt strange at first, living in those rooms where I'd spent so many afternoons, but also right, like I was finally where I belonged. 3 months after the trial, I hosted Thanksgiving at the house. Not a big production, just me and a few friends from work. We cooked together, laughed too loud, and made new memories in the old dining room where I'd once sat invisible. As I carved the turkey, I thought about Grandpa, about how he'd always saved the wishbone for me, about his terrible jokes and his war stories and the way he'd always asked about my students by name. "Thank you," I whispered to the empty air, "for seeing me." The doorbell rang during dessert. I wasn't expecting anyone, but when I opened the door, my heart stopped. Mom stood on the porch, looking small and tired and older than I remembered. "I know I'm not welcome," she said before I could speak. "I know you have every right to slam this door in my face, but I needed to say something and I didn't trust myself to do it over the phone. I'm listening. I was wrong. About everything. About you, about Dad, about what mattered. I spent your whole life making you feel like you weren't enough, like you needed to be more successful, more impressive, more like your cousins. And then when Dad chose you, I couldn't handle it. I couldn't accept that the daughter I'd dismissed had been right all along." Tears streamed down her face. I watched that video in court, and I heard Dad say things I'd never heard him say. How proud he was of you, how much he looked forward to your visits, how you'd taken notes at his doctor appointments because you cared about every detail of his life. And I realized I didn't know any of that. I didn't know him, not really, not the way you did. "You could have," I said quietly. "He would have welcomed you, right up until the end. He would have welcomed you. I know that now, and I have to live with that. But what I can't live with is you thinking I never loved you. I did. I do. I was just too stupid and stubborn to show it the right way. I measured your worth by all the wrong standards, and I'm so sorry." She reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. "This isn't me asking for money, or forgiveness, or anything else. This is me giving you something Dad gave me a long time ago. I'd forgotten I had it until I was going through old boxes last week." I took the envelope. Inside was a letter, dated 15 years ago in Grandpa's handwriting. "Dear Diana," it began. "You've been riding your daughter hard lately about her choices, her career, her boyfriend, her life. I want you to stop and think about what really matters. She's kind, she's dedicated, she shows up for people. Those are the qualities that define a person, not their salary or their address. One day you're going to realize you pushed away someone rare and beautiful. I hope when that day comes it won't be too late." I looked up at Mom. "He gave you this?" "After that Thanksgiving when I uninvited you, he was furious with me. I told him he didn't understand, that I was just trying to motivate you. He told me I was breaking your heart. I didn't believe him. I thought he was being overdramatic." She wiped her eyes. "He was right. About everything. And now I've lost both of you. You haven't lost me. Yes, I have. I see the way you look at me, or don't look at me. I'm not your mother anymore. I'm just the woman who gave birth to you." I thought about that for a long moment. Thought about the years of feeling inadequate, the holidays I'd spent alone, the phone calls that went unreturned, the lawsuit and the depositions and the public humiliation. All of it was true. All of it hurt. But I also thought about Grandpa's letter, about him believing in me even when my own mother didn't, about how he'd fought to make sure I was taken care of even after he was gone. And I realized something. Grandpa had taught me more than just the value of showing up. He'd taught me that holding on to anger would poison the life I was trying to build. "You're not invited to Thanksgiving," I said. "Not this year. Maybe not next year. But eventually, if you prove you mean what you're saying, there might be a place for you here. Not as the mother who gets everything she wants, because that's how it's always been, but as someone earning her way back into my life. One visit, one phone call, one genuine moment at a time." Mom nodded, crying harder now. "I'll take it. Whatever you're willing to give, I'll take it. Then start by leaving now. I have friends inside and this is their day, not yours." She turned to go, then stopped. "Your father wants to reach out too, and your brother. They're ashamed of what we did, but they don't know how to fix it. Tell them the same thing I'm telling you. Prove it. Show up. Not with money or grand gestures. Just show up and be present and actually care about my life. That's all Grandpa ever wanted. That's all I want now. Mom nodded and walked back to her car. I watched her drive away, then closed the door and returned to my friends. They asked if everything was okay. I smiled and said it would be. That night, after everyone left, I sat in Grandpa's leather chair with his letter in my lap. I could almost feel him there, could almost hear his voice saying, "You did good, kiddo. You stood up for yourself, but you also left the door open. That takes real strength." I raised my wine glass to the empty room, to second chances, and first priorities. 6 months later, I quit teaching, not because I didn't love it, but because I realized I could do more. I used part of the inheritance to start a foundation, Grandpa's Legacy Fund, dedicated to helping families dealing with elderly care. We provide resources for family counseling, respite care for caregivers, and educational programs about maintaining relationships across generations. We also fund scholarships for students pursuing careers in geriatric care. The irony wasn't lost on me. My family had fought to take away resources that could have brought us together, and I was using those same resources to help other families avoid our mistakes. Mom has visited twice since Thanksgiving. Both times, she called first, asked if it was convenient, and stayed less than an hour. She asks about the foundation, about my life, about things that matter to me. She doesn't talk about the lawsuit or the inheritance or her own problems. She's learning, slowly. Whether it'll be enough, I don't know yet. Dad sent a letter apologizing for his silence over the years. My brother called on my birthday for the first time in 5 years. Whitney sends occasional texts, usually just checking in, never asking for anything. They're all trying in their own ways. Some days I want to forgive them. Some days I remember the visitor logs and the phone records, and the fact that they only cared when money was involved. Grandpa's beach house became my favorite place. I spend weekends there, walking the same shores he walked, watching sunsets from the same porch. I've invited a few colleagues from the foundation, some of my old students' families, people who showed up when it mattered. I'm building a new family out of the ashes of the old one, a family based on presence, not blood. Last week, I found a box in Grandpa's attic. More letters, more photos, more evidence of his quiet life. But one thing stood out. A journal entry from 3 years ago. Diana called today asking for money for her son's restaurant. I said no. She hung up angry. I'm sad but not surprised. My granddaughter called right after, just to see how I was feeling. She does that every Tuesday. Doesn't want anything, just wants to talk. That's the difference. That's everything. I sat on the dusty attic floor and cried. For Grandpa. For the relationship Mom could have had with him. For all the years my family wasted chasing money while missing the person right in front of them. The estate has grown. The investments Grandpa made continue to pay off. I'll never have to worry about money again. But that was never what this was about. It was about validation. About proof that showing up matters. That kindness and consistency and genuine love aren't weaknesses or wastes of time. They're everything. Now when my kindergartners ask what I do, I tell them I run a foundation that helps families. When they ask how I got the money to start it, I tell them my grandpa left it to me. When they ask why, I tell them the truth. Because I visited him every week. Because I called him every Tuesday. Because when everyone else forgot, I remembered. And that mattered more than anything else. Some nights, I still dream about the courtroom, about the judge's words. This is not evidence of incapacity or influence. This is consequence. I wake up feeling vindicated and sad in equal measure. Vindicated because I was right. Sad because it shouldn't have come to this. My family shouldn't have needed a lawsuit to realize what they'd lost. But that's on them, not me. I'm building something new now. Something that honors Grandpa's memory without being defined by his absence. The foundation helps hundreds of families every year. We've expanded to 3 states. We're making a difference. And every Sunday morning, I still make soup. Different recipes, different ingredients, but the same ritual. I freeze portions and donate them to elderly care facilities. It's my way of carrying on what Grandpa and I started. He showed up for me. I showed up for him. Now I'm showing up for people who need someone to remember they matter. Last week, a woman called the foundation crying. Her father had dementia, and her siblings wanted to put him in the cheapest facility they could find. She was fighting them alone, trying to maintain his quality of life while everyone else just wanted convenience. I met with her personally, shared my story, connected her with resources, helped her understand she wasn't crazy for caring. "Thank you," she said at the end. I thought I was being overdramatic. My family keeps saying I'm too emotional, too involved. You're not, I told her. You're showing up. Don't let anyone make you feel wrong for that. She left with tears in her eyes but a straighter spine. I understood that feeling. The moment you realize you're not alone, that someone else sees your value even when your own family is blind to it. That's what Grandpa gave me. Not just money, but proof that I was seen, that my presence mattered, that showing up was enough. And now I'm passing that gift forward, one family at a time, making sure no one else has to fight alone to prove that love and consistency should be rewarded, instead of punished. The inheritance changed my life, but not in the way my family thought it would. It didn't make me rich, though I am. It didn't make me powerful, though I have influence now. It made me certain that I'd made the right choices all along, certain that the years of feeling invisible had been real, not imagined, certain that when given the choice between money and showing up, Grandpa had valued the showing up, and that was the only inheritance that really mattered. Sometimes I drive past Mom's house. I don't stop, just slow down enough to see the lights on inside. I wonder if she thinks about me, if she regrets the lost years, if she's truly changed or just playing a long game. Time will tell. I'm not in a hurry. I've spent enough years waiting for my family to notice me. Now they can spend some time proving they're worth letting in. In Grandpa's study, I've kept everything exactly as he left it. His desk, his books, his photos. The leather chair where he recorded that video. Sometimes I sit there and imagine what he'd say about how things turned out. I think he'd be proud. Not because I won the lawsuit or kept the money, but because I stood up for myself. Because I built something meaningful. Because I didn't let my family's rejection define me. The last entry in his journal was dated 2 days before he died. Made my final visit to the lawyer today. Changed the will one last time. Made sure everything was clear. Diana won't understand. She'll be angry. But my granddaughter will understand. She's always understood. She's the only one who saw me as a person instead of a bank account. That's worth more than they'll ever know. I traced the words with my finger, feeling the indent of his pen on the paper. He'd known exactly what would happen. He'd prepared for it, protected me from it, given me every tool I'd need to survive it. Not just money, but documentation, video testimony, a clear paper trail. He'd fought for me even after he was gone. That's what love looks like. Not grand gestures or hollow promises, but consistent, documented, undeniable presence. Showing up even when it's inconvenient. Remembering even when it's easier to forget. Caring even when there's nothing to gain. Grandpa taught me that. And now, through the foundation, through the choices I make every day, I'm teaching it to others. My family wanted the inheritance. They got a lesson instead. A very expensive, very public lesson in consequences. I hope they learned it. I hope they're better people now. But either way, I'm done waiting for them to catch up. I'm moving forward, building a life that honors the man who saw my worth when no one else did. And every Sunday, I still make soup.